So I want to welcome everybody here tonight. My name is Patty Schramm. I'm the Parent Resource Coordinator Trainer with the SALT program, SALT Talks for the online series. I'm the coordinator for several counties in Southwest Ohio. We have Montgomery, Greene, Warren, and Butler County. We have several other visitors here tonight joining us as well. So I want to welcome everybody. So tonight we're going to be following up from last night. And Laura, I forgot to tell you that we did have a presentation last night with the Disability Foundation. Greg Darling, he presented last night on Special Needs Trust. So they kind of had a lead in to this, and there was a lot of questions on stable account and still some questions going on with Special Needs Trust. So I'm hoping tonight will help tie everything together for everyone. So with that, I want to welcome the two speakers, and I think Doug is going to start tonight because he has another commitment later. We had Eric on the agenda, but Eric had an emergency he had to go to, and Doug was gracious enough to step in for him and cover, but you're in good hands with Doug, I tell you. So Doug, I did make you co-host, and you can go ahead and take it from here.
All right, I'm sharing my screen, and nice to join you again. My name is Doug, not Eric. Eric and I always like to joke and compete about who is the better presenter. And unfortunately, if you've never gotten to see Eric, we won't really get a fair comparison, but I appreciate Patty's encouragement and support. I've been doing presentations for Stable Account now for 5 years, but serving people with disabilities for about 23 years. And so it's a long history, and I'll bring some of that history into tonight's presentation just on what a stable account is, how it interacts with a person with a disability, allows them to save, the eligibility, many different things that will round out the stable account presentation. Laura Drake and I have also done presentations together many, many times. And the two tools that we're talking about tonight really complement each other. So it's great that both are available for you tonight. So that you can really compare, contrast. People often ask me, which tool should I use, a stable account or a special needs trust? The answer is yes. It really just depends on your circumstances. So to listen to both presentations is advantageous for you. I really like to have conversation. I love being in person with audiences. I do miss that. I like the convenience of this virtual. I'm sure you like being in your pajamas at home right now as well. Although I'm not in my pajamas, nor am I at home. It is convenient to be able to join you virtually. But I say that because I do encourage you to ask questions. If you have a question, put it in that chat box. Patty will interrupt and we'll get that answered for you. And then again, I have to cut out at 6:45 when my portion is done. Laura will do her portion. And if you still have a question about a stable account, I'd put money on it that Laura can answer that question. But I'll also have help information for you at the end of mine that if you want to follow up with a question, you can do that. So I'm going to jump into a PowerPoint that's on your screen. I'm sharing my screen, so you should see it. And this is really just a storyline for me. I don't particularly like PowerPoints, but it does help to put some information on the screen that you can follow along with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what an ABLE account is. And we titled it about stable accounts. And people say, well, what's the difference between stable and ABLE? Well, this is where I'm going to start in explaining what an ABLE account is. So ABLE is Achieving a Better Life Experience. It's an acronym for the federal legislation that passed in 2014, allowing people with disabilities an account that they could have in their own name, save money, and it doesn't count towards that resource limit. $2,000 is the resource limit for eligibility for programs like SSI, Medicaid, as well as many others, including housing benefits and other food benefits. So there is a resource limit or an asset limit or a money limit that a person who is receiving public benefits has, and that's $2,000. So you may or may not know that. It depends on whether you're currently using benefits or considering applying for benefits, or maybe it hasn't even crossed your mind yet, but that's a significant barrier. So people with disabilities don't have the opportunity to have money themselves because of that resource limit. An ABLE account changes that. An ABLE account allows the person with a disability to have money. It just needs to be in this protected ABLE account. So once the federal regulations passed, things started to move along that made it possible to develop these programs and allow people to sign up. So in Ohio, we created an ABLE program and we brand named it. So a stable account is an ABLE account. It's under the federal regulations. We have to abide by all of those regulations. We created our program to be in compliance with that, and we called it stable account. So stable is an ABLE plan for Ohioans as well as people across the country. You don't have to live in Ohio to participate in Ohio's plan. Much like a 529 college savings account, you don't have to live in the state of the program that you would choose for a college savings plan. Well, there's a lot of similarities between a 529 college savings plan and a 529A ABLE account. So under the IRS regulations, they're very, very similar. Now, obviously, there's differences as well, but we call it stable account. It's administered by the Ohio Treasurer's Office, and it launched June 1st, 2016. It still seems like just yesterday, but it was over 5 years ago when we launched. We're now at about 26,000 people using stable account. We remain the most used ABLE program in America. And I don't say that as a bragging right. I say that because if you don't currently have a stable account and you're considering one, there's 26,000 people who have tested, used, currently use, provide feedback to us. It is a product that is not brand new any longer. And there's some benefit to that. The downfall is that you haven't been saving for 5 years. The benefit is that it's been tried and tested over 5+ years, and it is a program that you can have some confidence in. But let me talk about who can use a stable account, because I'm going to talk about all the advantages of it. And it's like, oh, great, I would like to use that. Well, it's not for everybody. It's for people with disabilities. And the onset of that disability has to occur prior to the age of 26. So if you were born with a disability, you automatically qualify. If you're receiving services from a county board of developmental disabilities, the services you receive there have a higher criteria than what it is to be eligible for a stable account, meaning that if you're receiving county board services, you would also qualify for a stable account. To receive county board services, that disability has to have an onset prior to the age of 22. So for us, it is something that in working with county boards, it's a close connection, but not everybody that we serve receives services from a county board of DD. Also think about things like mental health conditions, medical conditions, wounded warriors coming out of the military. If the disability occurred prior to the age of 26, they could be using this program. Not only do you have to have the disability prior to the age of 26, but you have to have one of the following. Now, these following 3 criteria are very common in the world of disabilities, but you just have to have one of these. The first is if you are eligible to receive SSI or SSDI. You don't have to currently be receiving it. Just if you are or have been eligible to receive SSI or SSDI, you qualify for a stable account. Or any condition listed on Social Security Administration's list of compassionate allowances conditions. So if you want to look specifically for the diagnosis that you have, it may fall on that list of compassionate allowances conditions, and you would automatically qualify. Or you can self-certify, which simply means that you have a medical professional who has diagnosed the individual with a marked and severe functional limitation. So that's the same definition Social Security uses for disability. It doesn't have to use those exact words, but it would have to indicate that there is that severe functional limitation. It's also for conditions that have lasted longer than a year or expected to last longer than a year. So we're not talking about short-term disabilities like you're off work for 12 weeks because you broke your leg. We're talking about long-term or lifelong, typically, disabilities. Some are shorter. It doesn't have to be lifelong. Sometimes like maybe cancer would make it so that you couldn't work because of the treatments you were getting. And so you were off work with a disability that was lasting longer than a year. That could qualify you as well. But for our program, we don't ask for all of that documentation. And that's one of the barriers that we tried to eliminate, because we know that using public programs like ours, oftentimes you're forced to make an appointment, go meet with somebody, produce a lot of documentation, find out you didn't have the right documentation, come back for another appointment. We just ask you to self-attest that you have it and could produce it if you needed to. We don't actually ask you to submit it. So I see that we still don't have any questions yet in the chat box. Thanks for monitoring that, Patty. Again, feel free to put questions in there if you have any. If you don't have any, then I feel really good that we are answering your questions proactively. So let me tell you a little bit about enrollment. To enroll in this program, I just mentioned that we tried to eliminate barriers to make this program easier. Well, enrollment is done online. So any place that you have internet access, you can even do it from your smartphone. So laptop, tablet, computer, smartphone, any place you have internet, you could go to stableaccount.com and click the button that says open an account. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, our office doesn't have to be open. You don't have to make an appointment. You don't have to go any place. You don't have to worry about transportation. It is a very convenient way to open the account and manage the account. The enrollment process takes about 20 minutes, so very quick, especially since you don't have to go any place. Really start to finish is 20 minutes or less and you have the account. And there's a $25 minimum opening deposit, not a fee, just creates a balance in the account because the purpose of the account is for people to save money. So we don't want people opening an account if they have no money to save. So $25 opening deposit. Okay, Charles, I see you, Patty. I did catch it. Please stay on me because I won't catch all of them, but it happened to pop up there. He's a little confused by self-certification. Self-certification, Charles, simply means that you have medical diagnosis on file that indicates that marked and severe functional limitation. So a medical professional has at some point in the life of the individual who would like to have a stable account has determined a marked and severe functional limitation. We do, and since you asked the question, I'll expand on that a little bit, also have a form on our website now. This is new. It just came out in July. That we have a form you could take to a doctor. And if the doctor agrees with the form and signs it, that form would be all that you would need to qualify for a stable account. It would meet that self-certification. So Charles, it simply means that the other criteria that we pointed out, qualifying for SSI or SSDI, if you don't have that, or you don't have any condition listed on the list of compassionate allowances conditions, you could still qualify by a doctor, a medical professional, simply saying that you have a marked and severe functional limitation. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, we'll circle back around to it. So enrollment can be done by the person with a disability. We're very proud that about 1/3 of our accounts are opened and managed by the person, him or herself, with a disability. It's empowering because that means they are protecting, they're managing their own funds, they have access to their own funds, they're saving beyond $2,000 and still have full control of their money. Not every person with a disability can do that. So there are others who can open an account and manage the account for a person with a disability. And by law, those others are called an authorized legal representative. So an authorized legal representative is defined as a parent or a guardian that has financial oversight ability or authority. That would be in Ohio, a guardian of a state or a conservator, or a power of attorney. So if the individual with a disability is their own guardian, they could still sign a form and designate a person to manage their account for them. Again, we actually have a power of attorney form specific to stable account on our resource page on the website, that if you were working with a person with a disability who could sign for themselves and they wanted to assign somebody to do this for them, they could sign that form and you or the person they assign could open the account and manage the account. Now, an authorized legal representative by definition has changed, or by law has changed, to also include a grandparent, a sibling. Spouse is not on here. We're going to have to add that. That's another one that can be an authorized legal representative, or a representative payee. So if somebody has a representative payee assigned by Social Security, that person could manage the stable account as a representative payee. So we're pretty excited that more people can help those who qualify for a stable account. And that feature is coming very soon. That's why it says coming soon. Those additional roles that can fulfill an authorized legal representative, they will be able to indicate that in the very near future, hopefully by December of this year. Funding the account, you put money in 3 different ways. You choose the way that works best for you, or you can use all these ways. The first one would be like online banking. It's called an electronic funds transfer. You have an account with money in it. You use that account to transfer funds into the stable account. A check, you could write a check, put it in the mail, comes to a PO box. It would have to have the person's name and account number on it. We give you those instructions if you choose to write a check. We give you the address on where to mail it to, but write a check, mail it in, and we deposit it into the appropriate account. If it doesn't have the name and account number, it goes into my account. That's how I make a living. I'm just kidding, but you're not on video, so I can't see if you're laughing or not. But we have had no problems getting checks into the appropriate accounts. And then payroll deduction is another way that people can have money directed into their stable account. So that's simply working with their employer, whether it's mom and dad funding their child's stable account, or the person with a disability putting money into their own stable account, or any scenario like that. Employers now can put money from a paycheck into multiple different bank accounts. Well, a stable account is just like a bank account. So the employer could actually direct funds, a portion of the paycheck, into the stable account. We're pretty excited about that. Now, there are some limits on how much money can go into a stable account, but I say the word limit very loosely, very cautiously, because the limits are very high. Keep in mind that you couldn't have more than $2,000 prior to an ABLE account being in existence. Now with an ABLE account, at minimum, you can save up to $15,000 per year every calendar year. So year after year, you could continue to accumulate funds if you're not spending, or you could put the funds in and spend them back out as needed. But $15,000 per year is what you can put into a stable account if you're not working. If you are working, that's the person with a disability. If that person is working, they could put in additional money that is their earned wages up to the federal poverty line of the previous year. I know it sounds a little bit confusing. What that means is you could put in $15,000 plus an additional amount equal to $12,760 this year, totaling $27,760 worth of savings in each calendar year. Now, people without disabilities oftentimes struggle to save that much money. So again, when I say limits, very high amounts of money that can be saved in a stable account. With a lifetime balance of the account limited to $501,000, that's $500,000. And you came into tonight with a restriction or a savings limit of $2,000. With stable account, you can go all the way up to $501,000, a hefty amount of savings. Our system's built to reject anything that would put you over any of those limits, so it's a safeguard for you. Patty just showed up on the screen. She's got a question for us.
Yeah, it looks like there's a question out there, back to the ALR. Can an ALR be parent if an individual is 18 and parent does not have the legal guardianship?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a question that we commonly get. It's funny, the federal regulations don't exactly spell that out, but we look to what state law would be. When a person turns 18, they become their own guardian unless that is assigned by a court to be somebody else. So at 18, technically the person with a disability would take ownership of their own account if the parent was managing it prior to that. However, what our system does not actually kick the parent out. The parent should on their own seek the additional authority to continue to manage the account. Now that could be by their adult child signing a power of attorney form, making them the authorized legal representative, or if the parent is the representative payee for Social Security funds being received by the child, now an adult, as a representative payee, you would still have the authority to do that. So the parent could do it just as a different role after the child is 18. The last remaining resort would be to go back to the courts and become a guardian of the estate in this case, and take control of the financial matters. I always look to the least restrictive measures, and so I say that one last.
It looks like Doug, there's also a question about the lifetime that the screen you're on
Mhm.
regarding the lifetime max amount related to working or not. If not working, what is the max amount?
Sure. So really that max amount, the year to year amount depends on whether the person is working that year, because sometimes individuals will work during one year and not during the next. So that individual or that annual amount could vary between the $15,000 one year if you're not working up to the $27,760 the next year if you are working. The lifetime balance is a combination of any of those buckets that you're putting money into, whether it's earned wages or just the general contributions bucket. So the lifetime balance would just continue to grow based on the annual amounts and what you're allowed to put in annually based on your working status.
It looks like there's another one. What if the child is employed part-time, such as a summer job?
Yeah, great question. So you can put in earned wages up to the amount that they earn that goes above and beyond the $15,000. So let's say that mom and dad put in $15,000 for their child. The child has a summer job, but they only earn $2,000 in their summer job. Well, only $2,000 additional dollars could be put into the earned wages bucket or category, I would call it. So they would be limited in that scenario to $17,000 worth of contributions that year, because the amount above $15,000 if the person is employed is limited to whichever is less, their earned wages or the cap of the federal poverty line of the previous year. But a child could do that. We do have children working. McDonald's hires at 14 years old. So my daughter's 12 and she's already talking about getting a job. We're not going to allow that yet. All right, moving on. Great questions, audience. Thank you for these. I'll keep on track so that Laura has time as well. So we built in a gifting page into the stable account program. This was improved in July. We made several improvements in July. The gifting page, when you log into your account, is actually a web page that you create that has a unique link to just that one page. So somebody wouldn't be using that link to give somebody access to their stable account, but they could send that link out through text or email or social media. And anybody who receives that link could click on the link and make a contribution into the account owner's stable account. So it's pretty cool when you think about holidays, birthdays, graduations, times when you might receive a financial gift from a family member, a loved one, a friendly neighbor. That person who wants to give could give directly into the stable account. That's pretty nice to be able to protect it from not being counted as income, not being counted as a resource. Think about the situation where the person with a disability may be saving for a specific goal. You could use this page just like GoFundMe, set the goal, what that is. You could even describe the goal and then have a status or a progress bar on the contributions going towards that goal. So if the person wanted to buy maybe a vehicle, they could set their goal and say, if you'd like to help me buy a vehicle, or in some cases, maybe it's a modified vehicle. You could set that as a gifting page goal and have people receive a link to that, be able to follow the status of the giving towards that goal and contribute themselves through a crowdfunding feature to help that individual receive money in a safe and protected way. So great feature that we've added into this. We also have investments built in. Now, sometimes people get very nervous or very scared when I say investment options. The stable account is just like a bank account, but there's some additional opportunities to it. So the first option that you have is called the bank safe option. Just like a savings account, it would grow with an interest rate that is a low interest rate. You're not going to receive a lot of growth through the bank safe option. But that bank safe option is FDIC insured. It's a safe place to keep money that the principal could not be lost. That is different than an investment. Investments go up, investments go down. You can lose part of your investments in a bad market. You could lose all of your investments in a bad market. But what we know over the history of the investment market is that over time there are gains. So even with losses, even with significant losses, over the long horizon, there are gains. We've built in 4 different investment options that are a mix of stocks and bonds. These portfolios are managed by Vanguard mutual funds, or by Vanguard, they are mutual funds. So they range from a conservative level with 20% stocks, 80% bonds, up to an aggressive level of investing. Not as aggressive as you can get in a free market, but fairly aggressive with 80% stocks and 20% bonds. Now, usually I have in the audience somebody who's just getting very excited when I talk about investments because they love investing, they love financial decisions, they manage their own portfolios. Well, this is there for you. I usually also have people in the audience going, yeah, Doug, everything you just said, I didn't get. I'm putting it in bank safe. That's okay too. What I do want to say about investments, though, this is the big advantage of a stable account, is the tax advantage of a stable account. Investments grow tax-free, and even when you take the money out of a stable account, it remains tax-free. You never pay taxes on the growth inside of a stable account. So very happy to offer that. The federal government allowed that to happen because people with disabilities have higher costs associated with their life than a person without a disability. So they allowed it to be tax-free. The other tax advantage in Ohio is those who are contributing into a stable account can take up to a $4,000 state tax deduction for contributions made. So if you contribute less than $4,000, it's a dollar for dollar. If you contribute more than $4,000, it's up to $4,000 state tax deduction. So investments, tax opportunities, very good to know about to make your money work for yourself.
Doug, there is a question back about the gifts. Do the gifts count towards the yearly max savings?
It does. Great question. We actually, because of that, Jonathan, we allow there to be a limit set on how much can be accepted into the gifting page. But all of those gifts do go towards the $15,000. So some people, that limit allows them to say, well, I want to put in $4,000 of my own money to take advantage of the full state tax deduction. So they might set their gifting page maximum to be $11,000. So it really just depends on how you're using the account. But yes, to answer your question, it does count towards that annual amount that you can contribute. Okay, so spending from the account can be on anything that is a qualified disability expense. Now, let's look at the definition of that before anybody panics. This is not a way to for us to hold on to your money. It's very accessible to you to spend on almost anything that you need. A qualified disability expense is defined as this. The expense must be for the person with a disability. This is not to be gifted to others. It's a tax advantaged account to benefit the person with a disability. So it must also relate to health, independence, or quality of life. Health, independence, or quality of life. So justifying an expense, you just have to ask yourself, is it for the person with a disability, and does it help to maintain or improve health, independence, or quality of life? If the answer is yes, you can spend it. The categories on your screen are just examples. They're broad categories, everything from housing and rent, basic living expenses, which includes food. Laura's going to talk a little bit about the value of those 2 items and how a special needs trust and a stable account can work together to make the stable account a spending vehicle for a trust and make the spending more broad or more powerful for a trust. It can be used for transportation, buying a car, gas, repairing a car, modifications, Uber, Lyft, educational expenses. So you could use it like a 529 college savings account, assistive technology. So phones, apps for the phone, tablets, laptops, things like that, financial management. So actually, if you plan on opening a special needs trust, you could pay for the fees associated with that from your stable account. Health and wellness, so medical things. You can see that there's many broad categories, but really anything that helps to improve or maintain health, independence, or quality of life. Spending from the account happens in 3 different ways. One is to take money out of stable, put it back into a checking or savings account. That would allow you to spend it the way that you normally spend it. A second way is for you to, I apologize, I didn't turn my ringer off. Second way is to use a third-party check. So you log in, log into your stable account, tell us who you need paid, and we pay it. Very simple. The third way is what we call the stable card. Excuse me. The stable card is a loadable debit card. Why do I stress the word loadable? Because that feature helps so many scenarios. So let's look at a few scenarios where a loadable card could be a benefit. I'll first look at mom and dad, the child with a disability, minor or adult. If you're managing the account, significant value here. As the person managing the account, you can place a value of money onto the card, and that's all that can be spent by the card. So the child with a disability walks out with a card with their own name on it. It's a Visa card. They can spend at any place Visa is accepted, but the amount that they can spend is limited to how much money you have put onto that card. Let's look at a different scenario. The person with a disability is managing their own stable account. They can load as much money as they want on the card. A third scenario, a provider agency is doing money management for the person with a disability, but the person with a disability should have access to some of their own money. Some would call it a monthly allowance or monthly allotment of funds. The provider could put that amount onto the stable card, and that is the amount that the person with a disability has to spend. So that loadable feature, very powerful. The other protections of this card are that you can limit where the card can be used, the merchants where it can be used. There's no cash access. You can't go to an ATM and withdraw funds, no overdrafts. It tracks all of the expenses. So there's a continuous record of every place the card has been used, date, vendor, amount, and there's alerts that can be set. So you can receive an alert every time the card is used or when the card has low balances. So this Visa card is a very powerful card, and we provided it at no additional cost to stable account owners to be able to use as a spending method from their stable account. I do want to talk for just a minute, and if there's any questions about spending, we'll circle back around to those, about Medicaid and how a stable account impacts Medicaid, because we saw in the poll in the very beginning that some people were concerned about, does this impact my public benefits? For the most part, the answer is no. I mean, you can have money and keep your public benefits. That is the beauty or the value of a stable account. If there is money in the account and the person passes away, Medicaid recovery exists for all people that have received Medicaid services. But there's ways that you can protect your money from Medicaid recovery, and there's ways that Medicaid can have access to recover or reclaim some of your money as well. So a stable account actually does provide some protections, but it also has some vulnerability to Medicaid recovering some funds. So let's talk about that. Hypothetical scenario, person with a disability has $10,000 in their stable account when they pass away. They've received Medicaid services over their lifetime. Maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Medicaid services when you think about waiver services and prescription services and medical services, and it could be a very lofty bill. Well, for what Medicaid can recover, they can look to the stable account for the value of Medicaid services from the date the stable account was opened forward, but not to Medicaid services from the past. So it protects from the past Medicaid services. The stable account also allows for all qualified disability expenses to be paid out of the account before Medicaid recovery, including funeral and burial. So if somebody had $10,000 when they passed, but hadn't yet paid for funeral and burial, they may exhaust their stable account paying for funeral and burial, and Medicaid gets no money. Now, it is possible that if money still remains after those things, that Medicaid could recover if you've been receiving Medicaid services and the value of those services is recoverable from the estate of the individual. So they would look to the stable account to recover some of those funds. So that usually creates some questions. We try to be very clear about that. If you got a question, we'll be happy to answer that. But Laura will talk a little bit too, because special needs trusts, specifically third-party trusts, do not have Medicaid recovery. First-party trusts do have Medicaid recovery. Okay. I'm going to round it out here before handing it over to Laura because I have about 2 minutes left or so. Let me talk about account cost. So this account is not free, but it is of very low cost. There is a monthly cost of $2.25. We reduced that again in July. It wasn't a significant reduction, but it was another reduction. It was our second reduction in 5 years. It started at $5, went down to $2.50. Now that's down to $2.25. So our costs are not going up. The cost that the individual pays, our costs are going down. That's $6.75 a quarter. So you don't see that on a monthly statement. You see that quarterly being paid back to the program. That simply allows the program to exist. We're not a for-profit company or the Ohio Treasurer's Office. We just have to pay for it because there's no funding provided to run this program. So it's paid for by those who benefit from the program. There are asset-based fees that are the lowest investment fees you will find any place. In Ohio, between 0.19 and 0.33%. So if you're using those investments, you're growing your money, you're going to be paying between 0.19 and 0.33% of the growth back on those investment fees. So very low fees, but we're transparent about what those fees are and want to make you aware of that before you choose whether or not you want a stable account. Now, this is going to be a great segue. In just a minute, we'll check and see if there's questions specifically for me, but stable accounts and special needs trust, they complement each other. They work very well together. Trust can make a distribution into a stable account, so you can literally flow money through a stable account, but a trust can accept a lot more money than a stable account can. Unlimited amounts, where a stable account is limited to that annual contribution. $15,000, or if they're working, the $27,760. A stable account has a little broader spending because it can pay for food and housing. Stable account also has some tax deductions that the special needs trust does not. So the primary reason why many people consider a stable account is because of the access to the funds. Also, a primary reason why people might choose a trust is because of the limited access to the funds. So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish as to which tool would best serve your needs, or both tools working together. So I'll leave this up on the screen as we circle around to a few other questions. We do have a customer service team that will answer questions. We have a 1-800 number. They are not 24/7, but they do go into the evening. So even if you're working, we hope to be able to be available to you at some point to answer your questions there. We have an email address that is responded to, and we have our website, stableaccount.com, for enrollment, as well as a whole resource page on our website full of this PowerPoint, fact sheets, brochures, Q&A. So we hope that we can be a help to you without always being directly available. Patty, it looks like we have at least one more question.
Yes. If you choose one of the investing options, does the money made off the investment count towards the yearly max?
Great question. Somebody is really thinking about using their money the best way they can. No, it does not. The annual contribution limits are contribution limits. So the $15,000 if you're not employed, contribution limit. The additional amount up to the federal poverty line is a contribution limit of earned wages. So both are contribution limits. Even the $501,000 lifetime maximum balance limit, you can hit that, no longer make any contributions, but continue to grow the account to be more than that based on your investments. So investments do not count towards that.
Looks like there was a question, but they're asking if you are available for questions. I'm not sure, let's see.
Yeah, I'll type my email address in to the chat box. And if you send me an email, we can either set up a time to talk, or we can email back and forth to answer your questions.
And as a parent, I also, just for those attending, I have used the 800 number. They've been great to answer my questions. So don't be afraid to use that either. Let's see. When or where can we find out when representative payees are approved to open and manage account?
Yeah, that's a great question. We will announce it, but I'm not going to say that everybody's going to see an announcement we make. I like to think I'm so important that everybody listens to every word I say. But if we're putting out emails or something on our social media, you might not catch that. You could call our customer service and ask if it's there. Right now, we've been told it's coming out in December, which is right around the corner. They haven't said if it's beginning, middle, or end of December, but we are looking to have that implemented yet this calendar year. I also know timelines don't always get met. So if you're worried about that, just stay in touch with our customer service would be the best answer to that, to follow back up. Or you could try enrolling, and when you go to enroll, it'll say, are you enrolling for yourself or for someone else? If you're enrolling for someone else, it's going to say, how are you related to this person? And it'll give all of those authorized legal representative options. And if representative payee is there, you're going to know that it's added and we're good to go. If it's not there, then we haven't accomplished that yet. So there's a couple different ways you could tackle that. Hopefully one of those ways works for you, but we'll be announcing it as well. All right, well, it was great questions, engaged audience, happy to be with you. I hate to run, but I also know that Laura got great information to share with you. She's also very good with engaging with your questions. And I have another meeting to get to, so I'm going to be jumping off. I won't be available for any other stable account questions right now, but my email is on there, and happy to engage with you if we need to on an individual basis. So Patty, thank you for hosting us again.
Thank you, Doug. Always good. It's always good to hear from you guys and learn about the stable. So thank you. I appreciate you stepping in for Eric.
You're welcome.
Hi, Doug. It's always fun to follow you.
Sorry, Laura. Next time I'll let you go first.
Oh no, it's way better when you go first. I have no concept of time. So.
All right. Good night, guys.
Good night, Doug. Thank you.
Yep.
Laura, I made you co-host. I don't know, or did you want me to pull up this presentation? Either way.
Let me just make this white. I don't know what I've done. That's what I've done. Okay, there we go. I can do it. I have it up on my computer. So let me get to that.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I don't know why it's like this tiny thing, but I can make that happen really, really fast. So similar to Doug, I have a PowerPoint. I will flip through it at a pretty rapid rate, and I'll only focus on a few pages. But Patty does have the PowerPoint, so and it's available on her page of amazing information. There's only one major change at the very end. Our email has changed. So I work for Community Fund Management Foundation. We're actually in the midst of changing our name. It should be announced very soon. We have become Community Fund Ohio, and that's mainly because Community Fund Management Foundation is really long to say, though I would like to point out Community Fund Ohio isn't that much shorter, so, but whatever. I'm an attorney, and but I'm not here to give you legal advice. This is just for informational purposes, and obviously things can change. And if you don't have an attorney, you can contact us, and I'm happy to provide you with the names of attorneys who work in this field of law. We don't necessarily have attorneys in every county, but we're getting much better about that. So we can get you within a county of where you live, someone who handles this kind of stuff and who's knowledgeable on it. And that's one of the things I like to point out, is that you want an attorney who's knowledgeable in this field, because some dabble, and this is not the type of law you want someone to dabble in. Also, a lot of my slides Doug has addressed already, so that's why I'm going to flip through them. But what we're going to talk about is setting money aside that to provide for your child after their family is gone, or if they've received money that will negatively impact them, how an individual with a disability can protect that money. And again, we're talking about more than $15,000 to $27,000, because if you sent Community Fund a check for $14,500 because your child was in a car accident and that was how much they received, we would pick up the phone and say, what are you doing? There's a stable account. Just put it in the stable account. Why are you giving it to us? Now it might be that you'll say, oh, we already put 15,000. He actually got 29,000. We put 15,000 in the stable account, and then this is the amount of the pooled trust. We go, okay. But we do kind of question why people use us for anything under 15,000, because you have the advantage of the stable account now, which is a more efficient way of handling small sums of money. The pooled trust that Community Fund offers is going to be twofold, where it's for amounts that the individual with a disability receives in excess of 15,000, and then for funds you want to leave for the child. So when we look at these trusts, we're talking about third-party special needs trust. That's when you create the trust, versus the self-settled trust, and that's when the individual with the disability creates them. The D4A and the D4C are just terms, but those both have what's called a payback provision, because those trusts are created with money that the individual with the disability received. So therefore, that's Medicaid is allowing them to put that in the trust, but Medicaid is saying, okay, it was their money. If when they pass away, there's money in that trust, we get the money that's left in there. And that's what we want to, what a lot of what we're going to talk about today is how to avoid that with your money. And then we'll talk a little bit again about how stable accounts and trusts work together. And then I want to really focus on, I want to make sure we get to the point of talking about selecting a special needs attorney. So Community Fund is a nonprofit organization. Actually, most of the DD boards across the state, I think out of the 88 counties, I believe 80 contributed financially to create Community Fund. And our board is made up from people around the state of Ohio. And I knew I may have missed something. Our current trustee is not Equity Trust. It's actually Huntington Bank, which has been very handy because they're located centrally in Ohio and Columbus. We're seeing a lot of, it's a faster turnaround on getting checks. All right, so the use of the trust is to provide kind of an enhancement of individuals' lives, to provide them with the things that the state benefits don't, state and federal benefits don't provide, to give them options beyond that. But at the same time, the trust is to protect their benefits. So if you tell us that your child gets Section 8 housing, when we make distributions from the trust, we're going to make sure your child still gets Section 8 housing. So they don't lose something, a benefit they have worked for and earned, and that is making their life better. But we're still going to be able to use the money for anything else we need that won't impact that benefit. And when we look at benefits, we're looking at two things. Is it means tested or not? So means tested means they look to be eligible for that benefit. They look at how much money you have and what assets you have towards you. So Medicaid, the waivers, SSI, those are all means benefited. Section 8 housing, that's means benefited. Means tested. That's a means tested benefit. Medicare or Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, or SSDAC, which is Social Security for Dependent Adult Children. So if you've worked your whole life and paid into Social Security, and now you retire at 63 to 70, you've retired, your child who has been disabled since birth is entitled to that SSDAC, which is higher. It's almost always going to be higher than SSI. And that's not means tested. That also makes them eligible for Medicare. Again, Medicare is not means tested. I can have $1 billion and I get Medicare. If I made $1 billion, I can get Social Security Disability because I can't work anymore. And so that's what I paid in for. So those two are not means tested, sorry. So when we talk about, we've touched about this already, what's your, to be eligible for these benefits, they look at your assets, and we look at exempt assets and non-exempt assets. So in a properly written trust or in a stable account, those are exempt resources, but a non-exempt asset is going to be, is countable for benefits. And so just a standard bank account, whole life insurance, things like that, a second vehicle, those are non-exempt resources that may impact an individual's ability to obtain Medicaid or SSI. So a lot of what we talk about when we talk about these trusts is the concept of excuse me, is the concept of income. So if you provide your child, if you pay your child's rent, he or she doesn't live with you, but they live in an apartment, and then you pay for that, well, that's treated as income to the recipient. And that might impact their benefits because you're paying them income. Their SSI would be lowered. It's why once your child is on SSI, they have to pay you rent, right? Because if you aren't charging them rent, you're in essence gifting that to them. And so that's a big problem that we have. Payments from pooled trusts and any special needs trust cannot pay rent or mortgage because that's a shelter payment, and then that's treated as income. But this is the beauty of the whole stable account. If I was paying $1,100 a month for my child's rent directly to the landlord or to my child, then that would be treated as income. If I paid that same $1,100 deposited into the stable account, and it maxes out at a little under $15,000 a year, and then from the stable account pays the rent, that is not income. Okay, so that's where these trusts are so helpful when you have a stable account, because now you can get up around the in-kind support and maintenance. And that's kind of one of those big things that negatively impacts people's benefits, and we want to make sure we don't impact that. We don't negatively impact that. Sorry, I've had a cold all day, and I think it's starting to catch up with me. All right, so when we talk about health insurance, there's a lot of people think of Medicaid as health insurance, and that is true. Thanks to the Affordable Care Act, it doesn't actually matter what your income is. You might be eligible for a Medicaid even regardless of your income. The bigger thing that we talk about in our world of disability is the waiver. So people think, okay, well, and I've seen this come up many times. Mom and dad have a pension that's going to provide health insurance for their child. That's my parents. I have a brother who's disabled, and my dad was in the military. And so until my brother is 65, he gets the same military insurance that my parents get because of his disability. And so I've seen families say, oh, we don't need Medicaid because we have health insurance. Okay, that's one aspect of what Medicaid is. In the disability world, the bigger issue is the waiver. So there are three waivers. There's the self waiver, the level 1, and then the IO, which is the individual options. The IO is the coverall. And those are the waivers that provide for the assistance that your child may need to live independently. And so they're the ones that we want to protect when we talk about these means-based benefits. They're the ones that we care so much about. And to be eligible for the waiver, you can have no more than $2,000 in countable resources, countable assets. Your income can't be more than about $2,300 a month, and you have to have a disability.
Laura, there was a question for you.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll put my video here on.
Yeah, I see it. So the question is, can a beneficiary transfer money back and forth between a stable and a special needs trust? It depends. So the money from a third party, your money trust, right? Mom and dad put money into a trust, into a special needs trust. That money can go only to the stable account. It cannot go from the stable account into the wholly discretionary trust, because the stable account is your child's account. And once it goes in there, even though it's not a countable resource, it is your child's money. Now, if I have, again, remember I said we have two types of trust. We have that wholly discretionary trust, where that is mom and dad's money. It's never the child's money. They get the benefit of it, but it's not theirs. And when the child passes away, it goes to whoever mom and dad wanted. But if let's say we have a different account, we have the Medicaid payback trust, because the money in that trust is actually a settlement from a lawsuit that was the child was the beneficiary of. The child was the recipient of the settlement. That's the first party trust. In that situation, yes, the money can go back and forth between stable and the special needs trust. But so we were talking earlier about how Doug was mentioning that if you have more than $100,000 in the stable account, they could potentially lose their SSI. But you could take that amount of money, the amount in excess of 100,000 or 60,000 above, and put that into a Medicaid payback trust, and then they would continue to get their SSI. So, and then you could go back and forth moving the money between those two, because that trust has the payback trust. I hope that made sense. In my own mind, it kind of did, but all right. So that SSI cash benefit, I don't know if you know, but they just announced the new amounts for 2021, and it's actually it's a pretty big jump, actually. I was just looking at them. So it's going to be $841 a month for an individual. It's going to be a pretty big jump from 2021. The resource test has stayed the same. All right. This is not moving. Oh, no, there we go. I'm not going to do this. Hold on. So, okay. So let's talk real quick about one of the reasons you're on this presentation tonight is because you want to start planning for your child. You want to make sure that if you haven't already started, you want to make sure you're going down the right path. And if you have already started, you want to make sure you haven't done anything that's going to create a problem. So when you do this, no matter what, you never really know exactly what your child's going to need, but you know that if you give them the funds directly, they could lose benefits. And if they get money directly, there also is going to be, you know, I always tell parents, if you don't do anything, if you don't write a will, if you don't make any plan, that's okay. The government will take care of everything. And they will, but it wouldn't be the way you wanted it to be done. Your child will be protected, but your next generation won't be. And it's not as secure as what you would have wanted. And so that's why it's so important to make your own plan, because that way we'll have less court involvement and more direction from what you wanted for your child. So obviously, I mean, many of you should know this, that when your child turns 18, you technically no longer have to support them, but of course, that's not what's going to happen. My aunt was developmentally disabled, and in the 1950s and 60s, when she was growing up, my grandparents were told the only thing you could do back then, and this is true, was to disinherit the child. And that's what was happened in her situation. When they passed away, they left half to my mother, who was 32 when they died. They died very young. And then they left half to my uncle, who was 19 at the time. And the expectation was that they would each take the equivalent of what would have been 1/3 of my grandparents' estate and provide for their sister. And I think, and my mom understood that, and she knew what that meant. And my uncle, the 19-year-old kid who, you know, just liked to party, he did not get that. That was still a bone of contention until the day my aunt died. So he felt that they'd used all the money, and my mom felt they had not. So so that's, if you go to an attorney now, and there's still one attorney in Claremont County who says disinherit them, don't give them anything. Don't use that attorney. That's a horrible piece of advice. Your child is entitled to their share. It might not be an equal share based on what their needs are, but they should have a share of your estate if you're able to provide one. One of the things that I always point out is, you know, the thing that the government doesn't provide is good dental work. Yeah, they'll pay for some dental work, but not really good stuff. And you know, my aunt, she had Medicaid from when she was a young child, and they paid to extract her teeth, not to do root canals and crowns. And when she passed away, she had one tooth left. And we're from Iowa, and corn on the cob is a big deal where we're from. And that woman could still eat a corn on the cob with one tooth. It was insane. And she was really good at it, and very, you know, but you don't want to leave your child with one tooth. And that's one of the reasons why, you really don't. That's one of the reasons why looking at these trusts or a stable account is so important, because there's money in there to pay for the things that Medicaid doesn't cover, and Medicaid is not going to cover everything. So anyway, the other thing that some people tell me is, oh, well, I'm going to intentionally give my disabled child's share of their money to their sibling. Okay, because they love them and they'll take care of them, and that's great. Maybe that's true. But if the sibling passes away, the sibling's spouse will actually inherit the money. And if they're not married but have children, their children will inherit the money. And even if you think, oh, my grandkids will give the money back, if the grandkids are under 18 or actually under 21, they're not going to give the money back because the court won't let them, because they need the money. So also, just if by happenstance, the person you give the money to is in some sort of car wreck and is sued, suddenly this money is attachable, is by the person who was injured. And so that's why it's not an ideal situation to give the money directly to somebody else. So we look at a third-party trust. I'm sorry, I didn't want to go back. We want to look at a third-party special needs trust where your money is going into a trust for your child's benefits, or whatever they do not use during their lifetime will go to your other kids or your grandkids or the charity of your choice or wherever you want it to go. So when we talk about trusts, we're looking, excuse me, we're looking at, it's an agreement about how we're going to distribute the money. You're the one who creates it, you're the grantor, your child is the beneficiary, and the trustee is the one who administers and invests it. So you can be the trustee during your lifetime, but there's no money in there, so it doesn't matter. And so usually you're the trustee of your trustee on a testamentary or a living trust. You've heard those, a revocable living trust. Those are the ones that people do for their general estate. But for a special needs trust, they're going to be a little bit different. Revocable means you can revoke it and you can change it. Irrevocable means you can't change it. A spendthrift trust is a type of trust that was used before special needs trust came along. But the point of a third-party special needs trust is somebody other than the beneficiary creates it. It's usually created now, but it's not usually funded. There's no money or assets put in it generally until the grantor passes away. Sometimes that's not true. Like you might have a life insurance policy and you decide that the trust should own the life insurance policy. You might have some real estate you want to put in there, but usually they're funded in the future upon your death. So the purpose of these trusts is to supplement government benefits, right? They're not going to take over anything. They're not going to suddenly pay for the waiver services. That's still in existence. That's the whole point. Instead, this just allows them to provide for the things that your child couldn't otherwise have. And the thing you have to know in managing these trusts is that how distributions are going to impact the child, right? So if the trust pays for housing, well, then that's in-kind support and maintenance that will negatively impact their benefits. If the trust gives cash, just like remember Doug mentioned that the stable account doesn't allow them to take out cash and do an ATM withdrawal. It's the same thing here. Cash would be unearned income and that would negatively impact their benefits. Instead, the money from the trust is usually paid to the third party, to the dentist, to the airline company, or to the relative who bought the tickets and needs to be reimbursed. Trusts can hold generally anything. If it's a private trust, they can hold cash, a house, vehicles. Though they tend not to actually own the vehicle, they tend to put a lien on the vehicle. So the thing is, a third-party special needs trust is a very specific type of trust, and it has to be written, it has to be drafted properly, or it's considered a countable resource. And the big thing is, in general, you'll see here we have this support, education, and maintenance and welfare. That's called the standard of care. In my revocable living trust, it says, please provide for the support, education, maintenance, and welfare of my children. Okay, that's fine, but for your child with a special need, the maintenance and support, maintenance, and welfare, that's what SSI and Medicaid are providing. So if you want to provide for that, if your trust says do that, then it's not a special needs trust, and Medicaid will say, hey, you got that trust, use that, you don't need us. Once you've spent all that money, then come back to us. That's why it's so important that the attorney know how to properly draft that. They also have to have something called a poison pill. And a poison pill is just that somewhere in the trust it's going to say, if Medicaid ever says this trust is a resource, then it terminates and goes to the residual beneficiary. So your child with a special need, he's the primary beneficiary. The residual beneficiaries are the people who get the money in the trust after he or she passes away. So if Medicaid says, hey, this is a countable resource, then it goes to the next generation automatically. It jumps faster. And the theory is because it says that, Medicaid never actually makes the request because there's no point to that. The big thing that's so important about these third-party special needs trusts, it's not your child's money, the child with a disability. So when they pass away and Medicaid says, hey, we've paid $210,000 or $20,000 or $2 million, what's in that trust? We want it back. This was never theirs. So there's no payback. Medicaid can't ask for that. Historically, these third-party special needs trusts were not pooled trusts. Community Fund started a pooled master trust many years ago, at least over 15 years ago. And so they offer a pooled trust that does not have a payback provision. So sometimes people hear, some attorneys will say, oh, pooled trust, they have payback. That's old school. Most of the pooled trusts now offer the wholly discretionary trust with no payback provision. So that's an option that you can use to avoid the costs and problems and issues with private trusts. And so let's talk about that. So if you have an attorney draft a private trust, you have to select a trustee. And yes, it can be you during your lifetime, but since most of the money goes in when you pass away, you got to have a plan for that. So sometimes people will say, oh, well, I'll just name my oldest child or my typical kid or whatever. You have to remember that every dollar they don't spend for their sibling is a dollar more they get. And I know your child won't do that. Your child is a good child, but who are they going to marry? You don't know who they're marrying. You don't know who your in-laws are going to be and what they're going to say is a good expense and not a good expense. Also, I say this as a sibling, time is finite, and being the trustee of a special needs trust is very different than other kinds of trusts. It requires quite a bit of skill, and you have to make a decision. Do you want the typical kids spending the time figuring out how to be a trustee? Because now they've got to hire an investor. They've got to professionally invest the money. They have to make sure it's not all in one. They can't just have P&G stock or just Fifth Third Bank stock. That's not allowed. They've got to diversify it, and they have to know what that means. And do you want them spending the time figuring all that out and meeting with tax people at the end of the year to figure out how to do a K-1? Like, what is that? Or do you want them taking your other child to their doctor's appointments and to dinner and things like that? Now, you might have a child who's a financial planner who lives for this stuff. Well, then that's different. But you also need to think about, before you decide to name your typical kids as the trustee, you might want to make sure they want to do that. You can hire a professional trustee, but then they're going to take a fee. It's going to be a percentage of the trust. And because of that, most of them want several $100,000 in the trust to make that worthwhile. That's why pooled trusts become popular. If you're not sure, if you don't think it's going to be a lot of money, a pooled trust will take any amount of money. $5,000 will take less than $5,000, but $5,000 is when we technically consider them funded, or 5 million or 50 million, we don't care. But the advantage is that regardless of the balance, the pooled trust is there and will take care of it. I will say, if you're very intent on having a private trust with either a professional bank trustee or a relative as a trustee, okay, but make sure your attorney puts language in the trust that says, hey, trustee can put it into a pooled trust in the future. And that's really important because we see some of the banks, they have the trust in the beginning, and then as the balance is dropping, they're not making the fee they want to anymore, and so they want out. And so then they want to transfer it to a pooled trust. Because the one thing we cannot allow to happen is, well, there's only $50,000 left in here. Hey, person with a disability, here's a check for $50,000. Now, if it was $15,000, that's different because we can put it in the stable account, but we can't do that with 50. So we have to make sure that they have to have an option if they want to walk away from it, that they can walk away from it. And that's true for your children too. If you are determined that your child be the trustee, that's fine, but you need to have that option for them to get out too. And Patty, if I'm not mistaken, I think I end at like 7:15. Is that right?
Yeah, 7:15 or 7:20, allow for any questions.
Okay, and so I just really want to get to picking the attorney. So when you meet with an attorney and talk to them about special needs, about having a special needs attorney, these are some good questions to ask them. You don't even have to know the answers, but they need to know the answers. So how many special needs trusts have you drafted? Ask them to explain the difference between SSI and SSDI. If they don't know, run away. And again, SSI is for somebody who's never worked or has not worked enough to qualify for SSDI. And so it's a set amount, and it's entirely a means-based, a means-tested benefit from the government versus SSDI, where I can have a lot more money. And so that I can have as much money as I want. And so that's really important that they know the difference. Ask them to name and explain the waivers. Do they understand the level 1 and the self and the IO? Or are they just going to talk to you about the assisted living and the nursing home waivers, which are valid too, but they're not really what you're interested in most likely. Do they act as trustee? Will they serve as trustee, and why or why not? What happens if Medicaid denies them? Will they represent your family member? Do they read the POMs? And those are just the regulations on Medicare and Medicaid. How do they stay up to date on these laws, and what kind of organizations do they belong to? These are the kinds of questions that, you know, you're hiring an attorney. They work for you. If you do not feel comfortable with them, do not stay there. I have heard many people tell me, I just felt like I was pushed into a corner. I don't even understand what's going on. Okay, well then stop, because they need to be able to explain this to you, and they need to listen to what you want, and you need to make sure that they understand your needs. That's really important. If you don't get a good vibe about this attorney, walk away, because there's a lot more out there. So, you know, it's important for you to understand that they're working for you, and you need to make sure you feel comfortable with them. And if you don't, feel free to walk away. You can always contact me and I'll give you 5 more names. It's not a problem. You might have to drive if you're, you know, I might only have so many in Miami County, so many in Montgomery County. But if you don't like those guys, you might have to go to Butler or Warren or Hamilton. But I mean, it's not like you see them every 6 weeks. You see them a few times. You see them a few times in the beginning, and then you might check in once every 5 years. If you decided you wanted to use community fund, that's fine. All of our documents are on our website, but we require that you have an attorney assist you. And that's because I'm sitting here talking to you about community fund and pooled trusts and why I like them. And that's great, but it might not be the best choice for you. And we're happy to tell you when we definitely don't mesh, but you need to talk to an attorney and get a specialized advice for you. And with us, you set up the trust and you name what's called a designated advocate. And that's the person, and it could be your child with a disability, but it's the person who says, hey, community fund, I need money to pay for this. And community fund says, yes, you can, or no, you can't. And if we say, no, you can't, we tell you why not. And so one of my examples, my real quick example on that is because like if you had and I saw Jonathan, I saw your question, and I will answer it in a second. So if you have swimming with the dolphins, if you go to Florida and you submit an invoice to swimming with the dolphins, community fund will pay that, no problem. If you submit an invoice for dolphin therapy, community fund will deny that. And they'll deny that because therapy is covered by Medicaid. Now we will explain to you that you need to submit that bill to Medicaid, get the denial or a reasonable period of time and they don't respond. And once you have that denial from Medicaid, then we can pay. Because we can't be seen to pay something that's medical that Medicaid would cover. Otherwise, then the trust would be a resource to pay your medical bills. And so that's why it's so important that the trustee know what they're doing. So the question is, can SSI money be deposited into a stable account? It can, it absolutely can. It's a great way to save the money. It doesn't make it's still income in the month it was received. That doesn't change anything. But once you put it in there, it's converted to a non-countable resource. And so for kids who are living at home with mom and dad and paying their rent and stuff like that, that's perfect. The excess money that they're not using, it's perfect for that to go into a stable account. It's a great way for them to accumulate wealth, to save their money when they don't need it, because later in life, they will probably need more. All right, so that is the majority what I want to talk about. I do want to point out, I want to leave on this little page about especially this booklet by Barbara Jakins. She writes a book about managing a special needs trust. Whenever I have somebody who says, hey, I want my typical child to be the trustee, I say, okay, have them read this book. And if they still want to do it, great. And if they don't, then you need to find somebody else. But here's some other locations. So elder law attorneys often do special needs trust. It's a very common correlation. So that's another good resource, but you can always reach out to us and we can also give you names too of individuals you can reach out to. Yes, so the question is, if a child gets an inheritance over $15,000, should that be money be put in a third-party special needs trust? Well, it should be, but it can't be. So if mom and dad, if your mom and dad say, hey, I want to leave something to your child with a disability, what do I do? Then you say, okay, well then we need to create a third-party special needs trust that you can put the money into. And if that happens, that's great. If they don't do that and grandma dies and leaves your child $15,000, that is your child's money and it has to go into a first-party pooled trust with a payback. So that's why I say, if you don't do anything, the court will fix it. But if you do something, if you plan ahead, then yay, you can make it so there's no payback. But if they inherit the money first, and then if they inherit them, if they're just named in the will, then it's their money. There's no way around that. You can't put it in a third-party trust. You're going to have to put it in a first-party trust, and that's too bad because it has to have the payback provision then. But yes, once you decide to set up your trust, you should make sure that your parents and your siblings know that in case your child inherits from them, it should say in their wills, hey, and it should say in their wills that that anything that would go to that child goes into this pool, into the wholly discretionary trust, the third party trust, your trust. So the idea of look back is when you apply for Medicaid. And so it's a 5-year look, there's a 5-year look back is the best way to explain that. There's variations on that. It's not a hard and fast rule, but generally we say it's a 5-year look back for Medicaid. But it kind of depends on what's going on. If I don't have a disability from birth, then that look back is a little bit different because I didn't know I was going to go on Medicaid eventually. So and so for the inheritance and stuff like that, that would be the 5-year concept. So so if your 5-year-old inherits inherits $25,000, and you're not getting, and they're on your medical and you're not getting SSI, you're right, you don't have to put that into a first party trust because you're not going to be applying for SSI until they're 18. So there you could put that money into a wholly discretionary trust. Sorry, I don't know how to turn the phones off in our office. I've tried in the past. I cannot make the ringer not ring. I don't know how to do that. I'm not remotely savvy. And if I did it, I would never remember to turn it back on. Do you guys have any other questions for me though? It's a nice melodic ring.
Is there any other questions here?
And I'm gonna.
Oh, there you go. So there's one there from Jonathan. So if some is considering a pooled, whoops, it jumped 1 second. If some are considering a pooled trust, how should they approach it? Should they have their own lawyer represent them?
Yes, they should. You should always have a lawyer review what you're deciding to do. And that's why I'm saying it's part of an overall process, but yeah, Community Fund requires that an attorney sign off on it so that you truly understand what you're doing with these documents. And that's why I say we can give you names of attorneys who've used pooled trust. I oftentimes give names of attorneys who don't always use us. I mean, they're going to have the advice to you, what's the best choice for you, and they're going to talk about the ins and outs differently than I do. But I strongly recommend that. So the other question was, if my daughter's 16 and has more than 2,000 in her account, would she be ineligible for Medicaid? Not necessarily. She'd be more. She's ineligible for Medicaid if she still has $2,000 in her account when she applies, as long as she has spent the money in excess of $2,000 for her own personal use. That's fine. So she buys jewelry, she buys clothes. Who cares? If she gifts it, if she gives it away to somebody not for value, then that would trigger the 5-year look back. So she might be ineligible for Medicaid. There are different types of Medicaid though, so I don't want to say that that's categorically true, but basically as a general rule, yes, if you have more than $2,000, you're not going to get most types of Medicaid. And so, but that's if she does, that's the kind of money, assuming again that we're still not over 15,000, that we create a stable account. And if we are over 15,000, you have all of this year, you still have, a couple months left for 2021, then you have 2022. She won't be 18 until probably 2023, and then you have another that year too. So you could easily put $45,000 into a stable account before she would ever apply for Medicaid. So it would, and those would be allowable transfers, which would not make her ineligible for Medicaid. It would have no impact on her ability to obtain Medicaid, transferring the money from her bank account into her stable account. You could also do a pooled payback trust if she has like, $500,000 or more than 20,000 1 year. But I'm assuming that, I mean, if the 16-year-old has $500,000, woohoo! Can I be her best friend and her lawyer? Should I put the excess money into a stable account before she turns 18? Yes, most likely. Yes, that's what I recommend. Presuming that we're talking again under $45,000. Yes, that's an easy way. It's a very inexpensive account. It doesn't count as a resource, so it won't. And now again, if we're only talking about that she has $14,000 in there, you can wait until the day before you apply for Medicaid to put the money into the stable account. You don't have to put it in now because it's not an improper transfer. There's no look back for when you put the money into the stable account. So you can wait on that. If it is more than $15,000, I would put money in 2021 and 2022 and have the availability to put money in 2023. So, but if you're only talking about $5,000 extra, I'd probably wait until she's closer to 18 because she might need to use that money, and then I didn't really need to set the account up yet. But it's never going to be a problem that you set it up. It's $2 and 24 cents a month. I mean, it's just not that expensive to have that account open. So no problem. Do we have any other questions? Well, my email is here. It's this soh@communityfundohio.org. Feel free to email me and ask me any questions at any time or to give me a call. Our goal here is to be a resource for you. And hopefully that's what we are. And hopefully this was helpful. I feel like I was a little bit foggy with my cold, but I mean, I think I got the point across for the most part. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Laura's been a great help. And just feel free, things come up later, whether it would be through stable account questions or the special needs trust. Sometimes there's just some general questions you're not sure which direction to go. You can always email them. Also on the stable account, I've called that 800 number. That has done, if I've had some questions about a spending, can I spend it on this or that? I've called them for different things and they always answer. It's a live person and I've had no trouble with that number as well. But having the email for Doug and Laura is very, very helpful. Thank you, Laura, for all that. In the sense, because, there's always questions that come up and things change and you're not sure. Maybe in 3 months, you'll say, hey, what did she say about this? That kind of thing. Real quick, while you're thinking of some questions for Laura, I do want to, I'm going to launch another survey so you can take as we finish up here. And I'm also going to stop the recording. So those who want to just ask a question can just, can ask without having to type. But before I close the recording, I do want to also, or while I'm closing the recording, I just want to remind you that next week we have our SALT Teens. It's our student session. They're going to be talking on budgeting, which kind of fits in with all this as well. And also on Wednesday, our Lunch and Learn next Wednesday, 12 to 12:30, we will have assisted technology from Safe and Home Speaking. So let me go ahead and stop this recording because I want to open it up for questions. And I do thank you again, Laura, and thank you all for coming. So just please, this is a great time to ask questions to Laura because she has so much knowledge. 1 second.